Life is change, and you can be prepared. This is Sudden Money Insights, hosted by Susan K. Bradley.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the series, a podcast that we're doing with the Certified Financial Transitionist at the Financial Transitionist Institute. And these folks are the leaders in the world in two forces that come together, change and money. And today we have Josh Patrick, who is a certified financial transitionist, been with us for a long time, contributed tremendously to the body of work that we have. And he is our lead for business owner transitions, a very specific type of life transition. So Josh, thanks so much for being with me today and having this conversation. We've had important conversations and very fun conversations for many years together. But today, tell me a little bit about why the business owner space is so special to you.
Well, it's where I come from. So, I've been in business. I'm 69 years old. I've been in business for going on 45 years or so. The first 20 years I was in business, I was in a family business. My father sent me off to do my own little thing, and he sold me a piece of the business when I was 23 years old. I ended up buying the business back from him probably 7 or 8 years later. And we grew the business from a part-time employee to 90 employees. So when I sold that business in 1995, I was looking around saying, what's next? Decided that the wealth management world was a great place to land, start off as an insurance person, realize that business owners are interested in way more than insurance. And one of the things that I was taught when I first went into the insurance business was to find a natural market. Well, for me, the natural market's been pretty easy as people own other businesses like me, because I made probably every mistake that was possible to be made in the first 20 years I was in my business. I was among the worst managers of all times and had to get over that. I had to keep my business from going bankrupt at least 3 times. I had a $200,000 embezzlement. I had a salmonella breakout in the company. I had somebody kill somebody with one of our trucks. So I had all sorts of things that happened along the way that business owners experience. But because I was relatively arrogant, and that's an understatement, when I was younger, people might even think I'm still pretty arrogant, but back then I was truly out of control arrogant. And that's not a good combination for making a great business owner. So I learned all these things along the way, went into the wealth management business. People started asking me, how do I make my business? How do I fix the issues in my business? I'd already been there and done that. I'd read the books. I've been reading a book a week for, 40 years or so. So I read a whole bunch of business books, and I taught a bunch of seminars, and I attended a bunch of seminars. So I was in a pretty good position to help people think about their business in a different way. And I didn't realize I was doing this at the time, Susan, but about 7 or 8 years ago, you came out with a term which I have been absolutely in love with. And that term is thinking partner. I'm not a coach. I'm not a mentor. I'm not somebody who's going to tell you what to do. I'm somebody whose job is to sit beside you and help you think about the things that are going on in your business. And the most difficult thing business owners have to deal with are transitions. And there are tons of them along the way. Some are financial, some are not, but they all have financial ramifications.
When we came out with that term, thinking partner, I can remember pretty far back when we said that. And what we were looking for is a way to describe I don't even know if we had the certification back then. The certification's only about 11 years old. So the thinking partner term was trying to say something more than a guide, something more than a financial expert or a financial planner. But it can also be misinterpreted to being a friend who listens, someone who just lets you talk, think it through, somebody you've known for a long time, family member, best friend, someone you went to school with. So it can be minimized when you hear that term, but we actually have a lot of meaning behind that term. And transitions, no question, they're the reason financial advisors, financial planners are hired, and it's the reason people stay with them. Could be the reason people leave them if it doesn't go well. So when you think of yourself in the role of a thinking partner for your business owner clients, what do you bring to them that the other professionals in the business exit or the business transition space are not bringing? What is the difference that you bring?
Well, that's a really good question. And another thing you talk about, Susan, is two sides of money. And I've been taking that and saying, well, there's two sides of business also. In my first book, which is called Sustainable, we talk about personal and economic sustainability in the company. Now, most business advisors have got the economic side down at some level or another. Some are better than others, but they really focus on the economic side. But in my experience, if you don't work with the personal side, and you don't successfully work with the personal side, you never have a successful engagement, because it's both sides that have to come together. Now, obviously, if I ask a business owner, you want to make more money? They'll say yes. If I also ask them, do you want to have more free time? About 97% of the time, they're going to say yes. And the free time is that personal side of the business, which is where we teach people how to delegate effectively, we teach people how to bring other people into taking leadership positions in the company, so the owner can back out of the day-to-day conversation. And there's this term that's been going on forever with business consultants, which is you want to work on your business, you don't want to work in your business. Well, the truth is you want to do both. But you want to spend more time working on your business than the average bear does. You know, we fight with people when they first come to work with us to find 5% of their time where they can actually work on the business. Then they work to make that 6% and then 10%. And we like to get them up to 30 to 50%. If we can get them there and the business is still running well, we're going to have created a business that that owner is going to love and will never want to sell. So this is the funny thing about transitions, is that in the business world, when we get a business owner to the point where they can actually transition their business, they no longer want to do it. And do you know why?
I can guess, but go ahead.
They're making way too much money and they're having way too much fun. So why would they ever want to sell? People usually want to sell a business. And this is the transition that most people think about. I want to get out of my business. And when they get out of their business, they're thinking about that. They're not thinking about internal transitions, which is to managers or children. They're thinking about that third-party sale that's going to give them 2 tons of cash where they can ride off into the sunset and be happily ever after. Well, for most business owners, that's a myth. It just doesn't happen.
So there are some other things that happen around business owners in that space. Besides helping them get their business or cracking the cash flow code, which I think is the name of your podcast that I enjoy very much. Once they do that and they get to that point where they love their business, because let's assume that they started it based on something that they really enjoy doing, and then they figure out how to have time and how to have more money. But then life happens. They may get divorced. They may have an illness. They may lose a spouse. They may get an inheritance. The pandemic could happen, could flip the switch on them and a whole different life. So it's one thing to have a successful business, but then it's another thing to manage those events in life, those transitions. Do you think that business owners tend to manage their personal life transitions differently than, say, some other kind of professional, someone who works corporate or who's an artist or an athlete or something?
Well, it really depends. If they've done the work they need to do to make themselves operationally relevant, or they've reached operational freedom in their business, which means they're really not involved much in the day-to-day operations, they're in a position to handle all the other things you mentioned. If there's a divorce, they lose a loved one, they come up with a major illness, you know, and probably, I think it was 14 years ago, I had a life-threatening cancer event.
Yes.
And I didn't lose any clients. Our business kept going. I kept going. It was because I structured the business so even though I couldn't be there all the time the way I would normally be there was enough trust with me, with the people I was working with, and enough trust with our coworkers and our firm that nothing really bad happened along the way, except my business sort of got stuck in neutral for 4 or 5 years as a result of that. But the business didn't go away. I managed to make it through cancer. The business is relatively prosperous today, not as prosperous as it wouldn't have been if I hadn't gotten cancer, but prosperous enough. So the fact that we had structured things so I could be gone for a long period of time allowed me to get through that without having the business go away. Now, most business owners, where they're so involved in everything, if they have one of those sort of health events, the business goes away too. So not only do they have a divorce, loss of a loved one, major health scare, whatever that you could think of that comes down the road, making yourself into a passive owner or become operationally free from your business is the key to make it through those other things that might happen along the way. Now, the truth is they happen, but they don't happen that often. I mean, I'm trying to think of somebody I've ever worked with that had an event like that, other than a divorce while they were running their business. And a divorce running their business becomes a giant distraction more than it is a business threatening event, as long as we can figure out who's going to own what goodies after the divorce goes through. So it's a challenging thing.
So let's talk about some of the tools and process. You were successful before we met. You had a business and you were loving that business for everything that I could see. I knew you when you went through your really rough cancer, but you maintained a successful business. Why did you feel a need to become a certified financial transitionist? What difference did that make in the lives of your clients as business owners and as husbands and fathers and friends and so forth?
Well, as an advisor, you bring yourself to the engagement in many different ways. And I was really good on the technical stuff. I wasn't especially good on the personal side. And I realized I need to become better on the personal side. And your tools deal very effectively with the personal side. Also, I had a bad habit, and I occasionally still have this bad habit of making simple things way more complicated than they should be. And one of the things that you've done is you've taken, relatively complicated things and made them really simple and easy to understand. For example, you have this concept you call one-pagers. And one-pagers essentially is I'm going to present whatever it is I'm talking about, but it can't go on for pages and pages. It has to be presented on one page, be easy to understand. And for private business owners, if I could even make it into a cartoon, that would even be better, because the simpler I can make it, the easier to understand I can make it, the more effect and more influence we're going to have with the people we're working with. And more importantly, we can help them get to an outcome that they want. Meaning, you have another tool, which you call PMO, which is purpose, method, outcome. Now, that's a great tool for helping people to figure out what it is they should focus on. Because the truth is, business owners are generally trying to focus on 25 to 50 things at a time. And I can promise you, when you're trying to focus on 25 or 50 things at a time, nothing gets done. So we want to find that one or two or maybe three things which are really important, which will really move the needle. And if I use purpose, method, and outcome to do that, I am going to be successful. And more importantly, the person I'm working with is going to have real clarity about what's important for them and why they want to do it. And once they figure out those two things, then the how we're going to get there and who's involved becomes easy.
That all makes sense to me. And that is why I started this work back in 1995 was to give us in the financial planning space tools that can help people zero in on the things that are most important, how to create a calm mind and increase executive functioning in the midst of chaos and demand. The one pagers were originally created based on the advice from a school teacher, someone who had 26 kids in the class. And she said, I have 3 different kinds of learners and I don't know who's what. Some are visual, some are kinesthetic, some are auditory. So she decided that she had to do all of her teaching to what she called a 3-headed classroom. So in other words, she didn't zone in on an auditory or a visual. Everything she did was for all 3. And she looked at how a visual sees things, how an auditory processes, they don't read, they scan, how a kinesthetic does it. So we created those visuals with those 3 very, very general, there's so many more subcategories there, types of people. And then as we moved down the road, we learned about the science of data visualization for big data, how to take big data and put it into a visual, usually it's a graphic format, so you could understand a big concept quickly. And in their world, they said, if you do that, you increase recall by 650%. I'm not saying that we're perfect at either one of those. We try to be perfect for the financial planner client base, but do you think that it helps your clients remember what you talked about?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it helps on 2 levels. The fact is, if you have to reduce something 1 page as an advisor, you can't do that unless you really understand what you're talking about. You know, I often find that MBA, which I call MBA speak, where they do these very long, complex things, even the MBAs have no idea what they're talking about. They just say, well, okay, I've learned this in school and we're supposed to do this stuff. And I don't really understand it. And the person I'm working with is certainly not going to understand it, but I'm going to feel really smart. I would rather not feel very smart. I like to be seen as kind of a simple person, but I get results. And that's the whole point is we want to get results. Business owners are results oriented. They generally, especially in the private business world, if you have less than 100 employees, there's a pretty good chance you've never gone to business school. In fact, there's a pretty good chance in the blue collar world where I spend a lot of time, you've never been to college in the first place. You're a tradesperson. You started off and you built your business from being a tradesperson. And if the advisors you're working with are not simple and don't make things easily understood, you're going to make your client feel dumb, and nobody wants to feel dumb, and they resent themselves and they resent you. They're not going to tell you that. They're just not going to do anything you recommend because they don't understand it. It has to be simple or it's not going to be implemented. So 1-pagers really, really, really nail that in. More than memory, it gets them to take action.
Well, I think one of the things that we see is the opposite of maybe feeling dumb is feeling confident.
Yes.
And when you have big decisions to make in your life, you want to feel confident. You don't want to be just shooting into the dark. You want to be reasonably sure that you understand what you're doing. And even if you're taking a risk, that you're taking the best risk that you could be taking at that time. And that takes confidence. And that's one of the reasons that we created tools to create that executive functioning, enhance that, even if things are stressful. Confidence and managing so many of the expectations and the uncertainties of life. So maybe we'll save some more of this conversation for our next time together on a podcast. It's fascinating to look at the work of a certified financial transitionist, applying the body of work and all the protocols, exercises, and tools in an expert way with a specific kind of client. I think we all learn more about life and the evolution of life and the role of a thinking partner when we can talk to someone like you. So I thank you very much for your time. But before we cut out, you have a great podcast. You want to tell people how to find your podcast and your 2 books?
Sure. It's really easy to find the podcast. You just go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/podcast, and you get to see all 330 some odd episodes that are hanging out there. I've been podcasting for pretty close to 7 years now. And to find my books, they're on Amazon, they're at Barnes and Noble, they're easy to find there, or you can go to www.salereadycompany.com and you can buy the book there for half price. We're selling for $7.95, or www.sustainablebusiness.com, thesustainablebusiness.com, and you get our first book there for $7.95. So we'd love to have you buy the book. And if you do, please read it. And you're going to love it because they're both novels or stories. And leave a rating and review, an honest one at Amazon. And that would be great.
Thank you, Josh. I hope everyone takes Josh up on that, particularly if you are a business owner, and most financial planners are, or many are, or you work with business owners. It's always enlightening to talk to you from the Kingdom of Vermont. We know that you're never bored up there with all the writing and the podcasting and the great work you do with your clients. So we wish you well, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks so much, Susan. I appreciate your time.